Hey guys, what's up? It's Derp here, back with another video. This one I'm going to do some overview on some new stuff for PTR. I'm going to be focusing on these new runestone glass orbs that are going to have a pretty significant impact onto how we build our gear and the new meta for gems specifically. Yeah, so let's dive right in. The first thing I'm going to do is go up. I'm in the PTR. I'm in Brimstone Sands right now. Pretty sweet. Got this giant golden statue over here. You can see the pyramid in the background. It's pretty awesome. But I'll go over like an overview in another video. Right now, let's just get into the Rungeglass. Keep it short and sweet. So I'm going to kind of do this in order of healers, bruisers, IGVGs, ranged, and then kind of miscellaneous. For like Fire Staff, Ice Gauntlet. The bruisers, I'm going to cover pretty much all of what I think the meta is going to look like after this patch comes up. Because the Great Sword is going to switch some things around, I think. But let's get started with healers. So for healers, I would want to go with Diamond. But I'll kind of go through like an overview. Every gem type has different, I think it's what, 12 different types? 11 different types? There's Empowered, Ignited, Leeching, Frozen, Electrified, Siphoning, Punishing, Arboreal, Sighted, Energizing, and Abyssal. For healers, you're going to want to do the Energizing on your weapons. For sure. Either the Energizing or the Siphoning. My preference is going to be leaning towards Energizing because stamina is hugely important, especially after this patch. Another thing I'm going to get into in another video is how the dodge rolls are being changed. I know that they kind of said and they gave numbers, but what does that actually look like? So after you get hit, it's going to take you longer to start regenerating stamina if you're light. All healers should always be in light. So you're going to want that stamina to come back as much as possible. So for this goes for weapons and armor, I would all do, basically, all of your gems have the suffix of energizing. The Runeglass of energizing around it. In all of your armor and weapons. Now for your weapons specifically, I would do diamonds. Because 12% damage and outgoing health while at full health, and gain 8 stamina with each successful hit is huge. So you have that if you run IG, or if you run a Life Staff Void Gauntlet, you're going to want probably diamonds in both with the energizing suffix. If you're not having trouble with stamina management, you can try the Siphoning, because these give you 1.5 mana with each hit. And it's also 0.8 mana on each successful hit on your armor. So having the suffix of Siphoning on the end of it, it's going to be okay if you're having more trouble with your mana management versus your stamina management. You could even do a mix. Whatever kind of suits your needs, whatever your playstyle leans towards. If you are very frugal with your dodging, and you only dodge like before you're gonna throw a Sacred Ground or to get away, then you might be better off with with leaning more towards the Siphoning. But I know that a lot of healers tend to burn through stamina really quickly, especially when trying to escape or to consistently get their healing numbers up using that 20% bonus healing after dodging. So this synergizes with that really well. And for armor, there's the usual. Onyx are good because it does 2% physical damage absorption. Diamonds are also good in armor because of the 1.5% physical and 5% elemental damage. Malachites are good because of the 1.5 elemental and 0.5 physical. And opals are good because of the 2% elemental damage. And onyx are good because 2% physical. So that's healers. I'll do a quick rundown again. Opals, onyx, malachite, and diamonds are all good for the gems. And then either the Runeglass of energizing or the Rungeglass of siphoning are going to be the best. If you're running a rapier as your offhand, you might want to do the Rungeglass of empowered amber with an amber gem, because what that's going to do is going to make your rapier do more damage off of nature damage. It's also going to do, and it's going to scale off focus instead of dex and int, and its hits and, or no, it's going to be the, what is it? Yeah, is it the amber? Or yeah, amber with the, oh, that's arcane damage. Where is it? Yeah, Arboreal. So it's the Rungeglass of Arboreal Amber. So it's going to do the 40% nature damage, scaling off of focus, and then its hits are going to inflict a poison, dealing 8% nature damage per second for 2 seconds. So if you're under attack, especially like in OPR or 3v3s, or even in war, if you're not really near your team and you get caught out, and you're in like a 1v1 situation, with this weapon, you might actually be able to just straight up murder the other person really quick and move on. I know that I do this. I have a rapier with chain nature, and my ring has nature damage on it. And if I get inted on, like if I get attacked by like one-on-one by like a bruiser or a sword shield spear or whoever, I'll just put a sacred ground under my feet and murder the dude, and then move on. Get back to my team. Especially, or if my team's catching up to me, I'll just kill that person. It's just straight up. This is going to just make it even easier to do stuff like that. I don't suggest people do that a lot. You're a healer. You should be focusing on doing your job and healing. But this gives you that option. Because the 16% damage over 2 seconds of weapon damage over 2 seconds is actually pretty big. So you're going to be able to do a lot of damage really quickly, even with a rapier as a healer. But for the Lifestaff Wood Gauntlets, it's going to be double diamond for sure. And you're going to want to do the energizing or siphoning. Moving on to bruisers. For weapons, it is, my favorites are Jaspers, because the standard is, just by having the Jasper, it gives you more damage after taking a hit, and as a bruiser, you're always going to take hits. Now, this is going to go for once the meta changes, so when this patch comes out, I think that some of the great axes will be replaced with great swords, especially on the medium bruisers, because the burst damage potential is huge. The AoE damage is decent. It has a rend, a weaken, a flow, a pull. It has almost every single, and a plague. So it has almost every type of debuff in the game on one weapon. And you could get a lot of them by speccing into the damage tree. So this is just a huge amount of damage. So I would put Jaspers in your Great Axe, your Great Sword, your Warhammer. Those are going to be basically the big bruiser weapons, is going to be those three. And I think the biggest combo we're going to see, outside of some specialty stuff, is going to be Greatsword Warhammer in Wars. I think it's going to take place of the Great Axe. I do think that we might see some people testing out, like the people who run Greatsword Hatchet might be switching to, or not Greatsword, Great Axe Hatchet might switch to Great Sword, Great Axe. But in my opinion, those are both primary weapons. So which one is now becomes the secondary? In my opinion, it would be the Great Sword over the Great Axe because there's just so much more utility and outplay ability there. But they both do huge damage and both do really good AoE and have some decent CC. So, and like rends and stuff, slows and stuff like that. So I think, in my opinion, the Great Sword is just better. But you don't want to replace everybody with the Great Sword because you need the gravity well. You need a way to engage from ranged and slow and stop people and build clumps. Great Sword can't do that. The only weapon in the game that can is Great Axe, so I don't think it's going anywhere. But that's another video. For right now, what I would look at is you have several options, but like any of the damage options are good. The damage options are empowered. So empowered gives you 8%. They're all similar theme, you know. 8% of magic damage, certain type of magic damage per second for 2 seconds. That's empowered, ignited. So empowered is arcane, ignited is fire, frozen is ice, electrified is lightning, arboreal is nature, and then abyssal is void. For bruisers specifically, this one. It's the Jasper, Runeglass of Punishing Jasper. It deals 15% damage for 2 seconds, or you deal 15% damage, bonus damage for 2 seconds after taking a hit, and your melee attacks do an additional 2% damage. So that just straight up gives you 2% more damage. So it's basically a permanent 17% damage increase, always. And the cool thing about this, and I would put this in Great Sword, Great Axe, and Warhammer. The cool thing is that it also stacks on your armor. So if you're leaning more towards huge damage numbers and huge burst, then you're going to want all of your Onyx, Diamond, Malachite, Opal, all of those. Or if you have like Moonstone in for slash protection, if you're looking just to crank out the maximum amount of damage possible, have all of your gems be this. Because you can stack it in your armor too. And what it'll do is, so let's look at the Opal with Punishing. Opal with Punishing is 2% elemental damage absorption, and your melee attacks do an additional 1% damage. So that's an extra 5 to 8% damage, depending on your jewelry. Because if you could put these in your jewelry as well, if you're using like old rings or whatever, or the PTR or the PvP track rings and stuff where you can switch out the gems, if you have accessories on that, you can switch the gems out for. That's up to 8% extra damage. And then you have 2 from your weapon, so that's an extra 10% 10% bonus damage just for walking around with these gems. That's massive. It's not an empower. It's not going to get stripped away. It's just always on extra damage. And that's not even including the damage you're going to get from just having the Jasper in as well, which is also 15. So you're talking what? 8 from armor, 2 from your weapon, so 10. That's 25% extra damage, always on. That's insane. That's an insane amount of damage. Another option is if you're finding yourself dying and you want to play more for survivability, I would always do the Punishing in the weapons. But if you want some more survivability, I would do the Energizing in your armor. Because that 2 stamina with each successful hit, up to 10%, so that'd be what? Up to 16 stamina per hit if you have them on all of your armor. That's pretty big. So you could have your bonus damage coming from your weapons, and then the ability just to never end, to forever dodge in medium, from having Energizing on your armor. Those would be the 2 that I would do for any type of bruiser situation. would be the energizing and punishing. If you're going more for just maximizing damage, punishing. If you're going for a little bit more survivability, I would say energizing. There is an argument to be made for doing Jaspers with leeching. So it's 3% of your damage. You gain it back as health. On its own, that's kind of meh. But when you stack that with armor, that is another 8% back on your, if you did, say you did full leeching, weapons, armor, everything. That's what, 11% per hit. You stack that with a leeching ring and lifesteal on your weapon, and you're basically getting somewhere around, I think it's like 25 or 30% of your damage back as health. The self-sustain there would be insane. The problem is that, oh, I gotta move. The problem is that if you have a plague on you, that's going to be largely negated. So, in my opinion, it's not really worth it. I know a lot of people are probably going to try it out just because you could stack so much leeching and that sounds awesome. But plague exists. And Greatsword is adding another source of plague. And it's an AoE plague. So, right off the rip, if somebody's running a build that I know I will be running, which is like a point tank Greatsword blunderbuss build, I've already tested it. You're basically unkillable, especially if you can have outplay mechanics, or if you're good with the outplay mechanics, like the block, and you get a lot of that fortify. You're basically unkillable, but I could also lay down 44% plague just by myself on the point. So, if a bruiser with a huge amount of leeching comes up to me, he's just going to get plagued into the ground. That's not even including any screams, any hatchet, any of the other sources of plague. That's before any of that. So, leeching just isn't the right play, in my opinion. But yeah, let's move on to the IGVGs. For IGVGs, it's a little bit different. It's kind of similar to the Bruiser. It's like a mix between the Bruiser and the healers, kind of. Right off the rip, for the Ice Gauntlet, you're going to want to do an Aquamarine or Malachite with Frozen. The Frozen trait is huge because it inflicts Frostburn, dealing 8% damage per second for 2 seconds. You could also put this on your armor, which is pretty huge. Gives you 5% ice damage absorption, and your ice attacks do an additional 2% damage. Now, if you go down to Opal with Frozen, you get the 2% elemental damage absorption, and your ice attacks do an additional 2% damage. So that gem, the difference is going to change. But the Malachite is also pretty good because of this. 10% plus 10% damage against targets with an active crowd control status, and inflicts Frostburn, dealing 8% damage per second for 2 seconds. So that is slows, stuns, roots, anything that is considered a CC, knockdown, which happens all the damn time. And anybody in your Ice Storm is going to be slowed. So you're just doing 10% extra damage with your Ice Storm and to anybody affected by your root. That's pretty huge. But one of the reasons why I think that might be the better way to go, I know a lot of people have been switching off of that and going into putting like tier 2 Aquamarines in their Ice Gauntlets, but this is more the split is different. This is a 40% of damage is converted to ice, scale soft base weapon damage, or ant, whichever is higher. So it's a little bit more than the tier 2. So it's actually going to effectively lower your damage a little bit than it would versus just having a standard tier 2. Like that part of it's going to be a little bit lower than having a standard tier 2 Aquamarine in it. Whoa. Hold on. I'm going to cut this video and then I'll pick up back before my game crashed. please enjoy the beautiful loading screen music. And we're back. Or almost back. Yeah, sorry about that. Great game. Nothing ever breaks. Nah, it's PTR. It's to be expected. So, where was I? IGVGs. So, Ice Gauntlets. I think you're going to have one of two choices. I'm not sure how the math works out. I haven't tested it yet. These Rungeglass. The Rungeglass is hard to make. It's going to be expensive. So, be prepared and start saving that money. But Aquamarines, I would say, are probably going to be your best bet. Because the 8% damage per second of ice damage is going to stack with all the ice damage bonuses from your Ice Gauntlet. The Malachite would probably be the second option for that weapon. The Frozen Malachite. Because of the 10% damage against targets with an active crowd control, so that's just a flat 10% buff for almost all of your ice attacks. And you get the 8% ice damage per second, which stacks with all of your ice damage bonuses. And the same thing is going to apply to your Void Gauntlet in this build too. I have seen some people running Void Gauntlet with opals. So like a frozen opal or abyssal opal might be a thing, because it's a 12% damage bonus. And an 8% void damage per second would be useful, but you don't really get any other bonuses from it. So I might even just do a frozen opal, if you're going to run that way, a frozen opal, just to stick with the ice damage, because that perk from the Ice Gauntlet is a debuff. It's counted as a debuff. So even if they still have that debuff on them, and you do ice damage with your Void Gauntlet, it's still going to carry over. So you might be able to get away with the Aquamarine, the Frozen Aquamarine, in your Void Gauntlet as well. And just double up on those. For armor, you're going to want to, for sure, stack all of it into ice. So, of the frozen, not ice. So you won't want to do Aquamarines. You're going to want to do the Diamond, Malachite, Onyx, or Opal. And then run those with the frozen. You might want to throw a Moonstone in there as well. But the suffix should all be frozen, because it gives you an extra 2% damage. So that's up to 16% damage from there. 16% ice damage on all of your ice attacks. So either that, or you could split it with the Abyssal, so that your void damage does more damage, does bigger burst on your orbs. And that's where a lot of your burst damage is going to come from anyway, is your orbs. Or you could do energizing or siphoning. So those would be the three, or be the four. There's kind of more options. So it's going to be siphoning, energizing, abyssal, or frozen. Frozen would probably be my biggest choice, just because more damage is more damage, which is more damage, and damage is good. If you're finding yourself running out of stamina a lot, you could do energizing. Or if you're running out of mana a lot, which IGVGs tend to run out of mana a lot, but, you know, refreshing toast and mana potions are a thing. So if you're not running refreshing toast and spamming mana pots already, you should be. But if you don't want to do that, or if you're feeling yourself still running out of mana a lot, then you could have the siphoning in there as well. But I wouldn't put them on your weapons at all. I'd put the frozen for sure. But yeah, if you're trying to maximize burst damage, the abyssal might be on your armor, might be the way to go to get the 2% additional void damage. So you boost your void damage up. Because you don't get a ton of burst out of Ice Gauntlet, especially if you're running Storm, Shower, and Entomb. There's not really any burst damage potential, except for heavy attacks, which do chunk. Heavy attacks your just basic heavy attacks can do a lot of damage with your Ice Gauntlet if you do it right. But if you're leaning more into the burst damage from your orb, then having the amethyst, or not amethyst, aquamarine. That's what it is. Yeah, the aquamarine with frozen in your void gauntlet, and then doing the frozen, mixing your armor with frozen and abyssal would bump up your burst damage quite a bit. But yeah, energizing and siphoning might be a thing too. I like energizing for almost every build just because it's universally good. More dodging is good for everybody. But let's move on. Let's move on to the ranged. This is where I think, unfortunately, because I don't like musket players, musket players themselves are cool, I don't like musket or bow. Especially in OPR because we see too much of it. There's just so many muskets and bows. And this is just going to make it worse. Because for your weapons, it's a little overpowered in my opinion. Because they're already at range, they already get huge benefit. But if you look at the opals with the sighted condition, check this out. 12% damage while your stamina is not full, and your ranged attacks do an additional 2% damage. It's just giving them a flat 2% damage boost. And since they don't really since they're at range and don't really have to worry about getting attacked other than by other ranged users, they could just stack this in all of their weapons, all their armory, all of their armor, all of their accessories, everything. You just stack sighted on everything. So that's 2% for your weapon that you have out, and another 8% on your armor, or up to 8% on your armor, so anywhere from 5 to 8. So you can get up to 10% bonus damage just running around existing, kind of like the bruisers, but you're also at ranged. So you don't ever have to really worry about getting attacked unless somebody goes out of their way to attack you, in which case now the team is down a player because they're chasing you around. So this is just a win-win. And basically, there's no other option. There can be an argument made for energizing, or even going with a... because people are putting thrust gems in. There is can be an argument for something like frozen, especially on like Ice Gauntlet Blunderbuss, my thing is this. So say I put in an opal in my blunderbuss, and I'm running Ice Gauntlet Blunderbuss, or I run Aquamarine. If I run Aquamarine, I'm going to want to do Frozen. If I'm doing Ice Gauntlet Blunderbuss and I'm running Aquamarine, I'm going to also want the Frozen. Because 16% damage or 8% damage per second for 2 seconds is bigger than an extra 2% damage. It's just better. But with the amount of damage that these weapons, the amount of weapon damage that the ranged weapons have, the sighted is just going to be better, in my opinion. And it's not a damage over time. So it's going to increase your burst. It just increases your damage, which is going to increase your burst damage potential. But for Blunderbuss, I would say there's an argument to be made for the Frozen Aquamarine in your Blunderbuss. But I think what I'm going to do is just opal with sighted, because blunderbuss is a ranged weapon. So for blunderbuss, opal, you're going to get the 12% extra damage from not having your stamina full. If you're running heavy Ice Gauntlet blunderbuss and you're doing point tank, same thing as the bruisers do. Slap a Jasper in with sighted on it. 2% damage, plus the 15% damage from after taking a hit. If you're in the middle of a clump, if you're in heavy or medium and you're in the clump getting hit a lot with your blunderbuss out and you're using it more like a tank burst damage weapon, then slap an opal in there, or slap a Jasper in there, slap a strike or a sighted Runeglass on it, and your damage is going to go through the roof. And then as for armor, all of it's going to be energizing. All of it. There's no, either energizing or sighted. You could either do, sighted would be my first pick at ranged, but for blunderbuss, I would say energizing for sure. Because if you're Ice Gauntlet blunderbuss and your job is to point tank or get into clumps, so heavy or medium specifically, if you're light, I would go into either sighted or energizing. If you're heavy, I would just stick with energizing, period, and then put the sighted in your weapons. But yeah, for bow, musket, those players, you're gonna want to do full sighted all the way down. There can be an argument to be made for putting, like, I would do so opals with. So my opinion is opals with sighted all the way down, because it's just going to be burst damage, just straight up. You're going to hit harder. You're going to kill people more. You're going to secure kills more. You don't have to worry about it being a damage over time and possibly being negated by some kind of cleanse or something. It's just unavoidable base damage increase. There can be an argument. There's an argument to be made for running opal with some kind of, frost. The frozen opal. Rungeglass of frozen. Because if somebody has that debuff on them from an Ice Gauntlet and you hit them with the frozen, that's going to be extra damage, and it's going to get the bonus from the debuff, for the 25% extra ice damage. That can increase the damage, but it is, then again, it is damage over time. So it's 8% per second for 2 seconds. So it can be cleansed. Each tick is gonna have its own round of damage reduction. Whereas the sighted, it's just going to be a flat, guaranteed 2% damage. That's unavoidable. I would take that all day, especially since putting it on armor is just a flat 1%. You could get up to 10%. Whereas if you put the frozen on your armor, it's only going to be your ice attacks doing an additional 2% damage. And since if you split it with this, or if you split your weapon with ice with the frozen and like an aquamarine, or you could do like an aquamarine with sighted even. Like an aquamarine with sighted would be, it would switch your damage to frost, but in which case, and then you get the 2% ranged attack damage, but in that case just run frozen, so that half of your damage is, or 40% of your damage is now considered ice. It's scaling off of int or your base weapon stat, whichever is higher, and you're going to do the 8% ice damage per second. You're just going to want to keep that in there if you're going to want to go that way, so that you can diversify your damage output. But again, without muddying the waters too much, I think opal with sighted is going to be your best bet for your weapons. And then for armor, same exact thing. It's going to be diamond, malachite, opal, or onyx, and then maybe a moonstone or some thrust protection. Probably for ranged players like bows and muskets, probably thrust protection and fire protection. So add like 1 thrust gem and maybe get thrust protection on your ring and add a fire gem or a ruby in. But all of the suffix or the conditional on all of your gems should probably be sighted. Unless you're going to want to, unless you end up stacking all the way down frozen. to make it worth it, but I think sighted is just going to be the way to go. You're going to get way more kill pressure from sighted than you would the frozen side. Fire Staff Ice Gauntlet is pretty similar to the Ice Gauntlet Void Gauntlet, with the exception of I would for sure run the weapons with just stick to the damage type of the weapon. So Ice Gauntlet, you do Frozen Aquamarine or a Malachite, a Frozen Malachite. And then for Fire Staff, you'd want to do Rubies with Ignited, because that counts as a burn. So if you're doing Rubies with Ignited, you're going to get a slight increase to your fire damage. And the hits are going to inflict burn. Or you could do like, you could even do a Opal with fire damage. An Opal with Ignited would allow you to do 12% more damage while your stamina is not full. And if you're dodging around a lot, it's going to do a lot of damage. And you'd still get the burn effect. So you'd still get the 16% over 2 seconds of your base damage for the burn, and it counts as a burn, which should, if I'm not mistaken, burning lasts 20% longer. So having that ignited on your weapon is going to add it to, it's going to bump it up to another half a second and get you another 4% weapon damage. So it turns a 16% weapon damage over 2 seconds into a 20% weapon damage over 2.5 seconds, which to me is just bonkers. Fire Staff's going to do so much damage, especially with all the burning on it. But yeah, burns last 20% longer is huge. And you're just going to stack so many burns. It's gonna turn the Fire Staff into a dot machine. What else what else haven't I covered? Oh, the healer killers. So spear, sword, shield, hatchet, great sword, bow and muskets have already been covered. But like your melee DPS, like your light armor melee people with hatchet, sword, shield, or sword, shield, spear, or hatchet, spear, or rapier, hatchet, rapier, spear. So any of those combos, your best bet is to run something similar to the bruisers, but I would stick with opal for your weapons and run punishing. So the 12% damage while your stamina is not full, and additional 2% damage for your melee attacks. And I would just stack the punishing all the way down for all melee DPS, especially if you're in light. And I would run opal in your weapons, and then opal, malachite, onyx, or diamond in your armor, and then probably add some slash protection and thrust protection in there, and maybe a fire gem. Just because you're going to be in the back line a lot, and you're probably going to go up against bows and fire staffs and everything. So your defensive gems are kind of up to you, but I would have punishing and everything, just because you're going to get up to that 10% bonus damage, and that's, again, just kind of base damage, not interruptible, not cleansable, nothing. So a healer with a splash isn't going to be able to pull the burns off of you, you know? That's my big worry, is that so many people are running splash on healers now that some of these, like burning and frozen and all that stuff that are coming on these gems, are just going to be negated immediately with splash. And Greatsword has its own ways of cleansing itself. Like, one of the Greatsword's abilities just literally cleanses 2 debuffs from it immediately. Their heavy attacks get rid of 10% of a debuff's length. So there's all kinds of stuff for the greatsword that's just going to negate it cleansing. So, like, if half the bruisers start running greatsword, like I think they will, like a quarter to half. So if there's 20 bruisers in an army, you know, anywhere from 5 to 10 of them are probably going to be running greatsword in Warhammer, or a greatsword in Great Axe, some mixture of that, maybe more. But I think we're still going to largely see most of the great axes, but they're going to be able to just self-cleanse. Hatchets have self-cleanse. A lot of people have self-cleanse now. So, that's why I that's the reasoning behind my argument for sighted and what's it called? The punishing. Sighted and punishing. Just because there's no way to avoid that damage. They can't cleanse, they can't splash, they can't remove it with anything. It's not going to be affected by invigorated or any of those armor perks. It's just burst, pure burst. But yeah, before I exit this, I'll give you a quick overview of what you're going to need to start saving to make these rune glasses for yourself, or what you're going to be looking for. So you're going to need, they're all pretty much the same except for these glyphs, right? They take the same base materials. So the only thing you could really do to prepare yourself now is to get as much Azalt water as possible. Azalt water is about to shoot up in price on every server, if it hasn't already. It's going to shoot up again and again and again, and after this patch drops and people actually realize what it takes to make these rune glasses and how important these gems are going to be for your weapons and your armor, Azalt water is going to go skyrocketing, because you need it to make the charged sand. You need sandstone, which can only be mined in brimstone sand, so it's not out yet. You need sulfur, which can only be mined in brimstone sand, so it's not out yet. You're going to need these glyphs, which aren't in the game until brimstone sands, and these ancient globs of ectoplasm, which aren't available until brimstone sands comes out. So right now, if you want to get ahead, you're going to want to stock up on as much Azalt water as possible for this charged sand, because it needs 10 of it per glass. So if you're doing 10 gems, you're going to need 100 Azalt water minimum. Oh no. Where's the recipe for charged sand? I think it's up here. Oh no, it's just, actually, never mind. It's just sandstone. I thought it was Azalt water. No, it's, never mind then. You're not going to need Azalt water. Scrap that whole thing. Yeah, it's just sandstone and obsidian sandpaper. So you can't really do anything other than save up money. But this stuff's going to be hard to get. Sandstone's going to be super easy to get, but the sulfur can only be found at the sulfur pools. So pools of Orcus, baths of Mercury. It's these, like, they look like lakes or rivers almost, but they're surrounded by brown. Those are sulfur pools. So this one, this one, this one, and then I think this is a small one up here. But I'll teleport down here and show you what they look like. These pools are guarded by monsters. So they're going to be highly contested. Everybody's going to be fighting over sulfur. Sandstone's going to be relatively easy to get. It's very plentiful. But the runes are going to be expensive, and you either have to farm them or buy them. But sandstone, or sulfur, sorry, is guarded by these monsters over here. Let me see, there's one right there. So that is a level 61 elite. So, and mining this should aggro him. Oh, it didn't. But I think there's only, if I remember correctly, there's only like 5 or 6 of these that you can mine without getting aggro, like in the entirety of Brimstone Sand. Like 5 or 6. And they don't give you much, so there's 3, you know. And then the runes are super hard to get. You're gonna get the runes from these chests. So I could take the screenshot without dodging. But yeah, I think that's about it. So the runes are going to come from these chests, and you're going to have to take acid damage, so you're going to want to get some acid damage potions, which come from some of the quests. And opening the sarcophagus... Oh, I'm dead. Acid burn. That's how quickly you die from acid. But yeah, standing in the acid for too long, especially after you have acid burn, is going to kill you. But yeah, and that's going to be the fight for the sulfur, so that's going to be super expensive. Or you're going to have to spend a lot of time farming it up enough to get your glass. The rune stones come from all over the map. Some of them are going to be more difficult to find than others because there's one or two types of those rune glyph stones of these guys that you can only find in dungeons. Quests give you some of the quests up here give you some. Like I got these from a quest, I got these from a quest, but these I found, and I probably have been playing on the PTR. I did the whole main storyline quest on the PTR. I finished it. I finished as much as they'll give us. So, and I only found 3. So that's how difficult these are to find. You're going to have to be doing chest runs. It's basically like finding any of the rare stuff that comes from doing chest runs now. It's up there with rarity. Maybe not as rare, but and they only spawn in certain locations. So these things are going to be very difficult to get. So those rune stones and those gems are going to be super, super, super expensive. The Rungeglass is going to be hyper expensive to buy or to craft if you're buying stuff off the auction house, or it's going to be somewhat time consuming to go farm. But you're going to need it. It's going to make you do a lot more damage. It's going to make you take a lot less damage. It's going to be... The gems are just huge. So, yeah, I hope you liked the video. I know this went on a little bit longer. Sorry for the interruption with the game crashing, but I hope you like it. I'm going to do some more PTR content soon-ish. Finding some of the other stuff like these guys. Right here. The heart runes. Like this one's pretty dope. But yeah, I'll get to that in another video. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good day. Remember to like, subscribe, and all that. It'll help me buy more chicken nuggets.